When they dumped me in that cold shelter, I thought my life was over. But the day they came to my mansion, begging to come inside, that was the moment I knew karma never forgets. Stay with me, because what happened next will leave you breathless. The crowd gasped when they saw me step out of the black car parked in front of the mansion. I could feel their eyes burning with disbelief. The same family that once threw me into a cold shelter with nothing but a note that said, "You deserve it," now stood outside the Golden Gate, unable to come in. Their faces were pale as they looked up at the tall iron gate that separated them from me. I had dreamt of this moment for years, not for revenge but for peace. My son, Daniel, looked at me as if he had seen a ghost. His wife, Clara, clutched his arm tightly, her eyes darting between me and the mansion behind me. "Mom, is this your house?" he stammered. I smiled gently, even though my heart raced with a mix of pain and pride. "Yes," I said. "This is my home now." Funny, isn't it? The same woman you said deserved to live in a shelter now owns the kind of place you can't even walk into. Their mouths fell open, but before any of them could speak, the guard closed the gate slowly. The metallic clang echoed like thunder between us. Daniel shouted my name, but I turned away, my eyes welling up. That was the moment they finally realized. The mother they had abandoned had risen higher than they ever imagined. But how did I get here? How did an old woman with nothing but a bag of clothes and a note of hate end up owning a mansion that made her own family tremble? Let me take you back to where it all began. It started 3 years ago, on a cold rainy evening. I was sitting by the window of my small apartment, waiting for Daniel to visit. He hadn't come by in weeks. My daughter-in-law Clara had told me they were too busy with their new business. I didn't mind. I knew young people had their own lives. But that night, something felt different. The air felt heavy, like it was holding a secret I wasn't supposed to hear yet. Then there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, Daniel was standing there with 2 men I didn't recognize. His face was blank, almost cold. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. I smiled, trying to hide my excitement. "Of course, dear. Come in, come in. I made your favorite soup." But Daniel didn't move. He just looked down at the floor. "You can't stay here anymore," he said quietly. I blinked. "What do you mean, sweetheart? This is my home." He sighed heavily. "Mom, you're old. You can't take care of yourself properly anymore. Clara and I found a place for you. It's a home." "A home?" I asked, confused. "You mean a retirement home?" He didn't answer. The 2 men stepped closer and gently took my arm. That was when I realized what was happening. "Daniel, no, please," I whispered. "You don't have to do this. I can manage on my own. Please, son." He wouldn't even look me in the eye. By the time I was pushed into the car, tears blurred my sight. The rain hit the window like tiny stones, and my heart pounded against my ribs. I kept hoping he would change his mind, that he'd stop the car and say it was all a misunderstanding. But he didn't. We drove for hours, far away from everything I knew. Finally, the car stopped in front of an old building with cracked paint and broken windows. I looked up at the sign, "Haven Shelter for the Homeless." My stomach turned. "Daniel." I called out, my voice trembling. But when I looked around, he was gone. The car door slammed, and one of the men handed me a small brown envelope. Inside it was a single note written in Daniel's handwriting. It read, "You deserve it." For a moment, the world went silent. My legs gave way, and I fell to my knees in the mud. I wasn't crying because of the rain or the cold. I was crying because the son I raised with love, the boy who used to hug me every night, had turned his back on me. Inside the shelter, the smell of wet clothes and sadness filled the air. People looked at me with tired eyes, some nodding in pity, others too broken to care. The lady at the desk gave me a blanket and pointed to an empty bed near the corner. That was my new home. The nights were the hardest. The sound of coughing, crying, and wind slipping through cracks in the wall kept me awake. I missed my old bed. I missed Daniel's laughter. I missed being someone's mother. Days turned into weeks, and I began to lose track of time. But one morning, an old woman named Maggie sat beside me. She had been in the shelter for years, yet she smiled more than anyone else. "You can't cry forever," she said gently. "The ones who left you behind will see one day what they lost. But you need to live to see that day. Her words stayed with me. For the first time in weeks, I got up early and helped the volunteers clean the shelter. I washed dishes, folded clothes, even helped the younger people find jobs. Every night, I told myself, I will rise again. Then one afternoon, a local businessman came to donate food. He was kind, always talking to everyone and asking about their lives. His name was Mr. Howard. He noticed I was good with people and asked if I wanted to help at his small cafe nearby. That job changed everything. I worked hard, saved every bit I earned, and treated every customer like family. Slowly, my kindness brought blessings. People started trusting me, and Mr. Howard began teaching me about money, property, and investments. He said I reminded him of his late mother. Years passed, and my small savings grew into something more. I took risks, bought a small piece of land, and sold it for profit. Then another. And another. I had found purpose again. But deep inside I never forgot that note. You deserve it. Those words burned in my mind like fire. Not because they hurt me, but because they pushed me. I wanted to prove that I deserved more. Then one day, as I was looking through new property listings, I saw something that made my heart skip. A mansion for sale on Rosewood Lane. The same street where Daniel and Clara lived. It felt like fate. Without hesitation, I bought it. Cash. The day the papers were signed, I cried. Not out of revenge, but out of gratitude. I had survived. I rebuilt my life with nothing but faith and hard work. And now, I owned something my son could only dream of. But what I didn't know was that fate wasn't done with me yet. Because the next morning, as I stood on the balcony of my new mansion, sipping tea and watching the sunrise, I saw a car stop outside my gate. It was Daniel. And behind him was Clara, holding a letter in her hand and tears in her eyes. My heart raced as I stepped forward. What did they want after all these years? Before I could open the gate, Daniel shouted, "Mom, please, we need your help." I froze where I stood. What had happened now? For a moment I couldn't move. The sound of my son's voice, the same voice that once told me I deserved to be left in a shelter, made my heart twist in confusion. I stood there on the balcony, gripping the railing tightly. His tone wasn't angry this time. It was broken, desperate. "Mom, please," he shouted again. "We need your help." The security guard looked at me, waiting for a sign. My hands trembled as I nodded for him to open the gate. The heavy metal bars slid apart slowly, with a deep groan that echoed through the still morning air. Daniel and Clara rushed toward me, their clothes dusty, their faces pale and tired. I could barely recognize them. Clara's once perfect hair was unkempt, and Daniel's eyes were sunken like he hadn't slept in days. "Mom," he said softly, tears forming in his eyes. "We're sorry. We shouldn't have done what we did." I said nothing. I just looked at him, my heart torn between anger and pity. "What happened?" I finally asked. My voice came out calm, but I felt a storm inside. Daniel rubbed his hands nervously. "Our company went bankrupt. We lost everything, the house, the cars, even the savings. Clara's family refused to help us. We have nowhere else to go." I stared at him in silence. The same son who once drove me away was now standing before me, lost and homeless. Clara stepped forward, her eyes red. "Please, Mrs. Parker. We've made terrible mistakes. We were greedy. We thought we knew everything. But life has taught us a hard lesson." Her words felt heavy, but I wasn't sure if they came from guilt or fear. Daniel knelt on the ground, his voice shaking. "Mom, please forgive me. I know I don't deserve it, but I can't let my family sleep on the street." For a second, my eyes filled with tears. I wanted to reach out, to hug him like I used to when he was little and scared. But then, a flash of memory hit me. The cold rain, the car door slamming, and that note that read, "You deserve it." The pain returned like a wave. I took a deep breath. "Daniel," I said slowly, "do you remember the last thing you gave me before you left me in that shelter?" He looked confused at first. "Mom, please. Do you remember?" I pressed, my voice rising slightly. He swallowed hard. "The note." "Yes," I said bitterly. "That note. You deserve it. I've kept it all these years." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the faded piece of paper I'd carried since that day. The ink had smeared over time, but the cruel words were still clear. Daniel's face crumpled as he saw it. Mom, I was stupid. I didn't mean it. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought. You thought getting rid of your old mother would make your life easier. I interrupted, my voice trembling. You thought I was a burden. Clara started to cry. Please, don't turn us away. We've lost everything. We'll do anything, clean, cook, work, just don't send us away. I looked at them both, broken, dirty, desperate. Part of me wanted to tell them to leave, to let them feel the same pain they made me feel. But another part of me, the mother inside me, couldn't ignore their suffering. I sighed and looked at the guard. Let them in, I said quietly. They both gasped in relief. Inside, I led them to the living room, a grand space with white marble floors and golden curtains. They looked around in awe, clearly realizing how far I'd come. This is your home? Daniel whispered, still amazed. Yes, I replied. The woman you threw away built this with her own hands. Every tile, every brick. It's proof that pain can become power. Daniel sat down slowly, his hands shaking. I don't know how to face you, Mom. Every night I thought about you. Clara told me to call, but my pride wouldn't let me. Clara nodded quietly, ashamed. We were wrong, she said. You didn't deserve what we did. For a while, none of us spoke. The sound of the clock ticking filled the silence. Finally, I said, you can stay here for now. There's a guest room upstairs. But understand something, Daniel. This house isn't built on hate. It's built on forgiveness and hard work. If you're going to stay here, you'll have to earn it. He nodded eagerly. Of course, Mom. Thank you. I'll do whatever it takes. I gave a small smile, but deep down, I couldn't shake a strange feeling. Something about Clara's eyes made me uneasy. She wasn't crying anymore. She was looking around the room too carefully, almost like she was studying it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how life had turned around. How the same son who left me in the cold was now under my roof again. Was this truly karma? Or was something else waiting ahead? The next morning, I walked downstairs to make tea. But the sight that met me made my heart drop. Daniel and Clara were standing in the living room, whispering to a man in a suit I had never seen before. Papers were spread out on the table, property documents. When I stepped closer, they froze. Mom, Daniel stammered. We were just looking through. I looked down at the papers. My name was on them. And next to it, a second line had been added, Daniel Parker. My hands went cold. What is this? I asked, my voice rising. Clara stepped back, her face pale. It's not what it looks like. But it was. It was exactly what it looked like. They weren't here for forgiveness. They were here for the house. The mansion I built from pain and sacrifice. My heart pounded as I looked at them, my own blood betraying me again. This time, I wasn't the helpless old woman they once threw away. I clenched my fists and said quietly, get out. Daniel's face went blank. Mom, please. I said, get out. I shouted, my voice echoing through the halls. The guard rushed in, and Daniel tried to explain, but I raised my hand. Not this time, I said coldly. You left me once. Now I'm the one walking away. Tears blurred my vision as I turned around. But before I could take another step, Clara's trembling voice broke the silence. Wait, Mrs. Parker. You don't understand. She was shaking, holding something behind her back. It wasn't paper. It was a letter, old, yellow, and torn. And when she handed it to me, I saw my husband's handwriting. My heart stopped. What is this? I whispered, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it. Clara's voice cracked. It's about the truth, ma'am. The truth Daniel never told you. I stared at the letter, frozen, my world spinning. The words at the top read, if you are reading this, it means they've kept my secret. I gasped, the room spinning around me. What secret? And why did my late husband's letter end up in Clara's hands? Before I could ask, Daniel grabbed the paper from me. Clara, stop. She doesn't need to see that. But it was too late. I had already seen the first line. And it changed everything I thought I knew about my family. My hands shook as I held the letter, the faded ink swimming before my eyes. I could hardly breathe. The air in the room felt heavy, too heavy, as if the truth waiting on that page had been hiding for years, waiting for the right moment to explode. Daniel's face was pale. He kept glancing between me and Clara, his jaw clenched, his eyes wide with panic. "Mom, please don't read it," he said quickly. "It's old. It doesn't matter anymore." But I ignored him. Every instinct in me, the mother, the widow, the woman who had suffered and survived, told me that whatever was in this letter mattered more than anything he could say. I slowly unfolded the paper, my fingers trembling. The smell of age and dust filled the air as I began to read. "My dear Margaret, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. And it also means the truth I carried for years has finally come out. Daniel is not your biological son." The words hit me like a thunderbolt. My knees went weak. The room seemed to tilt sideways. What is this?" I whispered, staring at Daniel in disbelief. He looked away, his lips trembling. I continued reading, my voice breaking. "You were in the hospital when it happened. The nurse mixed up the babies. Our real child didn't survive. I couldn't bear to tell you, Margaret. You had already lost so much. So I took the other child home and raised him as ours. I hoped to tell you one day, but I couldn't. I didn't have the courage. Forgive me. Love, Henry." I couldn't feel my legs. The letter slipped from my hands and fluttered to the floor. For a long moment, there was silence, only the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then Daniel finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost trembling. "I didn't want you to find out this way." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I saw it. He didn't have Henry's sharp jawline. He didn't have my eyes. All these years, I'd ignored those little differences because love had blinded me. My voice was barely a whisper. "You knew." He nodded slowly, tears forming. "Clara told me a few months ago. She found the letter among my dad's old papers. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought, maybe it didn't matter." I stepped back, my chest tightening. "Didn't matter? Daniel, you let me believe you were my son. I loved you with everything I had." He reached out to me, but I flinched away. "Mom, I mean Margaret. Don't you dare call me by my name," I shouted, my voice echoing through the room. "You're my son, Daniel. No piece of paper can change that." Tears streamed down my cheeks. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, betrayal, confusion, grief. It all tangled inside me until it became something unbearable. Clara wiped her eyes and whispered, "I found the letter by accident, Mrs. Parker. I wanted to tell you the truth because Daniel..." He started changing after he read it. He became cold, distant. "That's why he treated you like that." He felt confused, lost, like he didn't belong. I turned toward her, my voice trembling. "So you're saying he left me in that shelter because he found out I wasn't his real mother?" Daniel covered his face, sobbing quietly. "I didn't know what to do, Mom. I was angry at everything. I thought you lied to me, that my whole life was fake. Clara told me it wasn't your fault, but I couldn't think straight. I thought pushing you away would make the pain stop." The silence that followed was thick and painful. Finally, I sat down on the couch, exhausted. My heart felt heavy, but deep inside, something strange began to stir. Not anger, but sadness for the boy who had grown up lost in a lie neither of us chose. I sighed. "Daniel, I may not have given you life, but I gave you love. That's what makes a mother. And nothing can erase that." He sank to his knees, his head bowed. "I know, Mom. I know. I'm so sorry for everything." Clara knelt beside him, clutching his arm. "We've both made mistakes," she said softly. "But maybe this can be a new beginning." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about all of it didn't sit right. If Clara had known about the letter for months, why bring it up now, right after moving into my house? Why reveal it in such a dramatic way, as if she wanted me to react? There was something more going on. That night, after they went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, looking out at the moonlit garden, thinking about Henry and the secret he'd taken to his grave. And then I heard it, faint whispers coming from downstairs. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding. I followed the sound, careful not to make a noise. The voices were coming from the study. Daniel's voice, low and shaky, and Clara's sharper, whispering fast. I pressed my ear to the door. She'll never suspect a thing, Clara was saying. You just need to stay calm. Once she signs the papers, the house will be legally ours. My blood ran cold. Daniel whispered back. Clara, I can't do this to her again. She's already been through enough. Clara's voice hardened. You think I want to live on the streets? She owes us, Daniel. If she hadn't kept the truth from you all these years, we wouldn't be in this mess. You deserve that house. You deserve everything she took. I felt my hands shaking. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. They were planning to steal my house, again. But I couldn't burst in yet. I needed to know more. Clara's voice dropped to a hiss. Tomorrow morning, we'll tell her you're too ashamed to stay here. Then you'll ask her to sign the property over for safety. Once it's done, we'll sell it and leave this place for good. I gasped quietly, stepping back. My mind raced. Clara wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous. She was using Daniel's pain to destroy me all over again. I hurried back to my room, shaking with anger and heartbreak. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered to myself, not this time. You took my peace once. You won't take it again. All night, I stayed awake planning what to do. By morning, I had made my decision. When they came down for breakfast, pretending everything was fine, I greeted them with a calm smile. Good morning, I said sweetly. I thought we could visit the shelter today, the place where it all started. I want to show you something. Daniel looked surprised. The shelter? Why? I smiled again, though my heart pounded with fury. Because sometimes, the place of your downfall becomes the beginning of someone else's redemption. They hesitated but agreed to come. As we drove down the familiar road, my stomach churned. I could already see the shelter's faded sign in the distance. Memories flooded back. The rain, the pain, the loneliness. But this time, I wasn't the broken woman who had been abandoned there. I was the woman who had risen. I parked the car and turned to Daniel and Clara. Wait here, I said quietly. I'll be right back. Then I stepped out and walked straight toward the person waiting by the gate. It was Mr. Howard, my old employer, the man who had helped me rebuild my life. And in his hand was a folder that contained every recording from the security cameras in my mansion. Every word Daniel and Clara had said. I smiled faintly. You got everything? I asked. Mr. Howard nodded. Every last bit. I took a deep breath, looking back at the car where Daniel and Clara sat waiting, unaware that their secret was already in my hands. This time, I wasn't just going to forgive. This time, I was going to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. When I walked back to the car, Daniel and Clara were still sitting there, talking quietly. They did not look up when I came near. Their faces were soft with shame, and they tried to act like nothing was wrong. But their voices sounded small and tired. I smiled at them like everything was fine. Come on, I said. Let's go inside. I want to show you something important. They did not argue. Maybe they thought I would be kind again. Maybe they thought I would forgive them and everything would be easy. But I had a different plan. We went into the shelter. The place smelled the same, a little like soap and old wood. People moved slowly down the hall. Some smiled at me because they remembered me. Others watched us closely. I felt strong, not weak. Inside my heart, a calm, steady fire burned. I had learned to stand up. I asked the shelter manager, a kind man named Mr. Alvarez, if we could use the big room for a while. He looked surprised when he saw Daniel and Clara with me, but he trusted me. He opened the heavy doors and let us in. The room held many chairs and a small stage. The windows were high and the light was soft. I asked Mr. Howard to sit near the front with a laptop. I told him to be ready. He nodded and looked nervous, but he trusted me too. He had helped me before when I had nothing. Now he helped me again. I turned to Daniel and Clara and said, "Sit down." They sat like children who had been scolded. Around us, a few shelter people and volunteers came closer. They had heard something was happening. Curiosity spread like a ripple. I looked at Daniel. "You said you wanted a new start," I said. "Here it is. But first, we must be honest." My voice was soft, but it felt like a bell ringing. Everyone listened. I asked Mr. Howard to play the recordings from the folder. He pressed a key and the laptop came to life. A small screen showed the inside of my house. It showed the study, the kitchen, and the living room. The sound was clear. At first, it was just background noise. Then I heard Daniel and Clara's whispers from the night before. My breath caught. Their words were cold. They talked about the papers, about making me sign things while I was tired. They talked about selling the house and leaving. They talked like my house was a thing, not a home. People gasped. Some covered their mouths. Daniel's face turned red. Clara's eyes widened. I felt a strange calm. I then played another clip. It was from the morning when Daniel and the two men came to my apartment all those years ago. I had kept that recording safe because I once thought it might help me. The sound was small but strong. It was the tear of a car door, the slam, and Daniel's voice saying, "We need to talk." There was the noise of hands guiding me, the soft sound of the note shifting in a glove, then a voice I recognized, Daniel's, saying nothing as the car drove away. The needle of the past dug into the room. A woman cried out. Someone whispered, "Oh no." I looked at Daniel and saw shame and fear. He could not hide. I could see every twitch of his face. I did not shout at him. I did not say mean things. I only said the truth. "You left me," I told him softly. "You put me in a shelter and you left me there with a note that said I deserved it. You made me small so you could feel big." Daniel's shoulders shook. "I was confused," he said. "I was angry. I felt like my world had been made of lies." "Lies hurt," I said. "But hiding from the truth hurts more. You will not take my home like a prize. You will not pretend to be kind now and steal from me later." Clara stood up suddenly. Her face was white. "You shouldn't," she began, but her voice was thin. I motioned for Mr. Howard to play the next clip. This one was from the day Daniel and Clara came with the papers. It captured the exact words they planned to use. Clara's voice said, "Once she signs, it's ours." Daniel's voice, small and shaky, answered, "We will do it carefully." The clip ended with them laughing softly. The room went quiet. Every person's eyes were on them. The shelter, full of people who had been hurt by others, felt like a mirror that showed what some family members could become. The people who had been kind to me came forward and said they had seen both Daniel and Clara acting strange around my house. They had seen them looking at rooms with new interest. One volunteer said she found property ads hidden under Clara's old coat. Daniel dropped his head and began to cry. It was not a good cry, not the one from a healed heart. It was the kind of sound a person makes when they are unmasked, and there is nowhere to hide. Clara tried to lie, then stopped. The courage had left her face. I stood up and walked to the front of the room. I looked at everyone and felt that warm, bright light inside me. "I forgave them before," I said. "I gave them a place to stay. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. I will not be used." A young man from the shelter spoke up. "Mrs. Parker, you taught me to never give up. You gave me a job. You saved me." The room filled with small voices telling how I had helped. Their words gave me strength. Then I said something I had not planned. "Daniel, Clara, you will leave now. Leave the papers you want signed on the table. Do not touch anything in this house or my bank. I will have a lawyer look at everything. If you try to steal, I will call the police." Daniel raised his head. He looked ruined. "Please, Mom," he started. Clara moved like she would cry, but her face changed. Her eyes hardened. She reached into her bag. I thought she might pull out a paper or a phone. Instead, she reached for something long and dark. It flashed in the light. For a second, my mind could not name it, but people around me did. A volunteer shouted, "Knife!" The sound hit the air like a drum. Everyone froze. Clara held the knife in her hand and looked at me. Her face was a hard mask. "You think you can ruin us?" she said, voice low. "You think everyone is on your side?" People backed away. Daniel rose slowly, hand on her arm as if to stop her. "Clara, don't," he said. But she pulled free. I felt the world narrow to one small point, the glint of metal and the thunder inside my ears. My hands shook, but I did not move. I thought of the nights in the shelter. I thought of Mrs. Harper's smile and Mr. Howard's faith. I thought of every small kindness that had kept me alive. You don't have to do this, I said quietly. You can choose a different path. She snarled. You left me no choice, she cried. At that moment, the door flew open. A volunteer named Rosa ran in with two men from the shelter. One was big and calm and the other small and quick. They shouted, "Put it down." But Clara did not listen. She lunged forward with the knife raised high. Everything moved fast. The volunteer tried to catch her. Daniel screamed and grabbed her arm. The knife slipped and clattered on the floor. It skittered across the tile and stopped beneath a chair. Everyone gasped. But Clara did not stop. She fell to her knees and clutched her chest and began to sob in a loud, ugly way. Daniel looked like someone who had been broken in two. He looked at me with a mixture of hate and fear. The volunteers held Clara gently now, but their faces were angry. They wrapped her in a blanket and spoke softly so she would calm. She kept crying that I had ruined her. People whispered around the room. My heart pounded. The knife lay where it had fallen. I looked at Clara and felt a very small, cool pity. She had been so lost that she would risk hurting someone for what she wanted. I felt no triumph. I felt sadness that we had come to this. Mr. Howard closed the laptop and stood up. He looked at me with kind eyes and said nothing. I felt the weight of choices around me. I had done a good thing by showing the truth, but now things had spilled into danger. The police arrived shortly after. Someone had called when the knife fell. Officers walked in with serious faces. They asked questions and took statements. Daniel and Clara were put in separate chairs. Clara was given a medical check and then gently questioned. Daniel sat with his head in his hands. I watched it all from a distance. People asked me if I wanted them arrested. I said, not yet. I wanted to see if repentance was real. I wanted to see if Daniel would truly be sorry. I wanted to see if there was a way to fix what had broken. But police were careful. They took the knife as evidence. They noted the recordings. They said they would look into the paper plan and call a lawyer. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Before they left, one officer looked at me and said, "You did the right thing by bringing this into the open, ma'am. Secrets like that can hurt people for years." I thought of Henry's letter, of the nights alone in the shelter, of the hard work I had done. I felt tired and brave at the same time. The truth was out. The people who had meant to steal had been exposed. Yet the damage was real. Trust, like glass, was cracked. As the room emptied and the police drove away, I sat on the small stage and took a long deep breath. Daniel had been the boy who once took my hand and asked for a bedtime story. He had become a man who could hurt me with silence and with plans. Clara was taken to a small room at the shelter for the night where a volunteer would stay with her. Daniel stayed with his head bowed. The shelter hummed with quiet talk. Some said I should press charges. Others said I should forgive and let time heal. I thought about what to do next. I could make them leave forever. I could turn them away and lock the gate. But my heart was not only steel. It was made of little pieces of love and memory that did not break so easily. I decided to meet with a lawyer the next morning. I would protect my home. I would make sure nothing was signed without a lawyer. I would help Clara get medical care, because hurting someone is often a cry for help. But a new worry came that night like a shadow at the door. While I slept, a loud knock woke me. I went to the window and saw a police car and another car with dark windows. My heart jumped. The knock came again, harder this time. When I opened the door, two men in plain clothes stood there with serious faces. One held a piece of paper that looked like it had been stamped by a court. "Mrs. Parker," one said, "we have a warrant to search this property. There are claims of fraud and illegal documents. We need to inspect your records." The paper trembled in my hand. I thought of the recordings, the folder, the papers I had hidden. I thought of Henry's letter. For a moment, fear went through me like cold wind. Who filed this? I asked, my voice small. The men would not tell me on the step. Only that there had been a complaint about forged documents. Someone had accused me of hiding things. Someone had moved quickly after our meeting at the shelter. My heart beat fast. I realized suddenly that someone close to Daniel and Clara might have talked to a lawyer. Someone who wanted to grab the house by law. Or someone who wanted to hurt me. I looked at the men in plain clothes and then at my door. I thought of all the steps I had taken, all the nights awake. I felt the ground beneath me shift. The officer reached for the door as I stood there. I clutched the banister and thought. I had exposed the plot, but now a new danger had come. One that would reach into my home like a cold hand. The door swung open. The night air was heavy and cold when the officers stepped inside. I could hear the faint chirping of crickets outside. A strange calm against the sound of their firm boots on my polished floor. My hands trembled as I held the paper. It was real. A search warrant with my name on it, signed and sealed. I had faced many things in my life, but I had never been accused of a crime before. The taller officer, a man with kind eyes but a stern face, said, "Mrs. Parker, please understand. This is just procedure. We received a report of forged property papers and hidden assets. We must check your files." My voice shook. Forged papers? Hidden assets? That's absurd. I've done nothing wrong. The other man, younger and quiet, began opening drawers and taking photos of documents. He moved like he had done this 100 times. Every click of the camera felt like a hammer against my heart. I looked around the house, my house, and thought of all I had built. The laughter of friends, the meals I cooked for the shelter staff who came to visit, the smell of roses from the garden Henry and I once tended. All of it felt fragile now, like it could be taken away with a signature. Then I realized something. Daniel. Or Clara. One of them had done this. I asked, "Who filed this complaint?" The tall officer hesitated. "We're not allowed to disclose that, ma'am. But I can tell you, it came through an attorney's office this morning." This morning? I whispered. That means, right after the incident at the shelter. He nodded slowly. The truth hit me like cold water. Daniel must have panicked after what happened. Maybe Clara, in her anger, told him to strike first before I could secure the property legally. It was revenge, cruel, quick, and planned. The officers searched for nearly 2 hours. They opened my safe, went through files, and even looked under the mattress. I stood there silently, trying to breathe, my heart aching with every second. Finally, they stepped back and said, "Mrs. Parker, we didn't find any false documents. Everything seems in order. But we'll still need to keep these few papers for verification." They held up a small stack, the folder I had used to prove Daniel and Clara's plan. My evidence. I wanted to stop them, to scream, "No, those are mine." But I stayed calm. "When will I get them back?" I asked softly. "In a few days," the younger officer said. "Once the investigation is cleared." When they left, the silence they left behind felt enormous. I sank into my chair. My fingers brushed the edge of Henry's old letter, still safe in the drawer beside me. My eyes burned with tired tears. For the first time in years, I felt like I was back in that shelter again, small, alone, and unsure who to trust. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept spinning. What if Daniel tried to twist the story further? What if Clara told the police that I had tricked them? What if the truth got buried under lies? By dawn, I made a decision. I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Henry's brother Richard. He answered after 3 rings. "Helen." His voice was surprised but warm. "It's been a long time." "I need your help," I said. "It's about Daniel and Clara. They've done something terrible." He listened quietly as I told him everything. The note, the shelter, the recordings, the knife, the police. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "I warned Henry years ago that greed can rot a heart if you feed it too long. You did everything you could for that boy, Helen. But it sounds like he's lost." "I can't give up on him," I said. "He's my son." "And that's what makes you different," Richard said softly. "I'll call someone I trust. We'll fix this the right way." By afternoon, a lawyer named Martha came to the house. She was sharp-eyed, calm, and professional. She reviewed the documents left behind and the warrant. After a long look, she said, "Mrs. Parker, someone tried to paint you as unstable. They included false financial claims in the report, things that don't exist. Whoever did this used your son's name." I gasped. "Daniel?" She nodded. "Yes, but I don't think he did it himself. The handwriting on the supporting letter looks like a woman's. Could be your daughter-in-law." My stomach turned. Clara again. Martha leaned forward. Don't worry. They made a mistake. I'll handle this quietly. For now you must stay calm and do nothing rash. Sometimes the best revenge is living better. Those words stuck with me. 2 days later, I received a call. It was from the shelter. Mr. Alvarez sounded worried. Mrs. Parker, you need to come here, he said. It's Daniel. Something's happened. My heart raced. I didn't ask questions, I just grabbed my coat and hurried out. When I arrived, the shelter was buzzing. A few people were gathered near the front desk. I saw Daniel sitting in a chair, his face pale, his hands shaking. He looked like he hadn't slept. Clara wasn't with him. Mr. Alvarez whispered. He came here early this morning, saying he had nowhere to go. He said Clara left, took all the money from their joint account and disappeared. I blinked in shock. She left him. Yes, he said. And she took more than that. She took documents, too, ones the police had copied. We think she might be trying to use them against you. Daniel looked up then, eyes red and swollen. Mom, he said, voice breaking. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted what was mine. But Clara, she betrayed me. She took everything. Please help me. I felt so many things at once. Pain, anger, pity, confusion. This was the same man who had left me with a cruel note, who had tried to steal my home. And now he was here, asking for help. I knelt beside him slowly. Daniel, I said, my voice trembling. You left me once when I had nothing. You made me sleep on a cot in this very shelter. You told me I deserved it. And now you sit here, broken, asking for mercy. Do you understand how deep that cuts? He nodded, crying. Ido. I was wrong. I was angry at Dad, not you. I thought you favored others. Clara told me you were hiding money. She filled my head with lies. I was stupid. I sighed. She used your greed against you. That's what greed does. It makes fools of us all. He grabbed my hand. Please, Mom. I don't have anyone else. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I looked around the shelter. The same walls that had once held my pain, and felt something shift inside me. Maybe it was grace. Maybe it was justice. Finally, I said, you can stay here for a few days. But this time, not as a victim. As a worker. You'll help the people here. You'll learn what it means to rebuild. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find the man you lost. He nodded slowly, his tears falling. As I turned to leave, Mr. Alvarez stopped me. Mrs. Parker, are you sure about this? I smiled faintly. Yes. Sometimes the only way to teach someone the value of kindness is to let them live among the kind. That night, I went home alone. I sat by the fire, the flames dancing against the window. The house felt too big, too quiet. I thought of Daniel sleeping in the same shelter he once abandoned me in. Life had a strange way of turning full circle. Then my phone buzzed. It was Martha, my lawyer. Her voice was urgent. Mrs. Parker, we found Clara. My heart stopped. Where? She's at an airport in Chicago. She's trying to fly out of the country with the property documents and some of your late husband's banking information. The police have detained her. I stood up, heart pounding. Is she under arrest? Yes, Martha said. But there's something else. She claims Daniel planned it all. She's showing them forged messages and bank transfers that could frame him. I froze. What? Yes. She's trying to shift the blame entirely onto him. If she succeeds, your son could face prison. My hand shook as I held the phone. I thought of Daniel sitting in that shelter, broken and begging for forgiveness. I thought of all his mistakes, and of my own choice to forgive him. Now he was in danger again. I looked at the flickering fire and whispered, "What have you done, Clara?" Martha's voice was firm. "Helen, we need to act fast. If you still want to save your son, we must prove Clara was the mastermind. Do you have any hidden recordings or letters she might have written?" I swallowed hard. My eyes drifted to the old wooden drawer near the fireplace, the one that still held Henry's final letter, and one more thing I hadn't told anyone about. Something that might change everything. I stood frozen by the fire, my heart thudding so loud it felt like it would shake the walls. Martha's question echoed in my ears. "Do you have any hidden recordings or letters she might have written?" I did. There was something. Something I had kept locked away for years. Not because I thought it would one day save me, but because it had once broken me. I reached into the old drawer and pulled out a small, faded envelope. It was yellow with age and sealed with a drop of wax that had long since cracked. Inside was a letter. Not from Henry, but from Clara herself. I remembered that day so clearly now. It had been just after Daniel and Clara's wedding. She had sent me a letter, pretending it was a sweet thank you note. But hidden at the bottom was a small confession, a careless, prideful line that had haunted me for years. I opened it again, my hands trembling, and read it aloud. You always think Daniel will choose you, but wait and see. I'll make sure he learns to love my way of life. Maybe one day, everything you own will be ours, and then we'll see who deserves what. I could hardly breathe. Clara had written it years ago, when her cruelty was still young and smiling. She had already been planning to control Daniel, and me from the very start. I called Martha immediately. I have something, I said, my voice shaking. A letter from Clara from years ago. It proves she had this plan long before now. Martha's tone sharpened. Perfect. Don't send a copy. Bring it directly to me. We'll hand it to the detectives ourselves. Within the hour, I was in her office. She read the letter carefully, then nodded. This is good, Helen. Very good. It shows intent and manipulation. It'll help prove Daniel wasn't the mastermind. But we'll need one more thing. A direct link between Clara and the false bank transfers. That's when I remembered the folder I had given to the police. The one containing all my original recordings and documents. If Clara had stolen any digital copies before fleeing, then maybe there were traces of her using Daniel's name to access them. I think I know how to prove it, I said. But we'll need to check my home computer. Henry used to keep all the financial records on an old hard drive. Clara once borrowed it, saying she wanted to help Daniel with taxes. Martha's eyes brightened. If that drive still has her login information, that's the proof we need. We drove back to my house together. The wind was cold, the kind that cut through your coat and made the night seem endless. When we arrived, everything looked still, until we stepped inside. The front door was slightly open. I froze. That door was locked, I whispered. Martha placed a hand on my arm. Stay behind me. We stepped in cautiously. The living room light was on, though I hadn't left it that way. A shadow moved near the window. Then a voice spoke, soft and trembling. Mom. It was Daniel. He looked pale and tired, holding his phone in one hand. I didn't mean to scare you, he said. I didn't know where else to go. The shelter was full tonight. Relief washed over me, but only for a moment. Martha frowned. You shouldn't be here, Daniel. The investigation is still open. I know, he said, but I needed to tell you something. Clara called me. I felt my blood go cold. She called you? From custody. He nodded. Yes. She said she's going to make sure I pay for everything. She said if I don't confess, she'll show the police fake receipts and messages. Ones that make it look like I told her to do it all. She said she already sent them. Martha's face went pale. That means she still has access to your accounts. Helen, we need that hard drive right now. I hurried to the study and pulled the old box from under the desk. Inside was the hard drive, heavy metal and dust-covered. Henry's handwriting was still on the label. Martha connected it to her laptop. If she ever used this computer, we'll find traces, she murmured. Minutes passed. The air was tense, the only sound the quiet hum of the laptop fan. Then Martha stopped, her eyes wide. Got it. She turned the screen toward me. There it was, Clara's email address, linked to multiple login attempts on the same day as the fake bank transfers. And worse, the IP address matched the same location as the airport where she had been arrested. I gasped. So it was her. She did it all. Martha smiled grimly. This is the final piece, Helen. You just cleared your name and your son's. Daniel broke down, covering his face with his hands. I don't deserve you, Mom, he sobbed. After everything I did to you, and still you saved me. I knelt beside him, tears filling my eyes. You're my son, Daniel. You lost your way, but everyone deserves one last chance to come home. Just then Martha's phone buzzed. She answered quickly, then looked at me with a faint smile. The detectives have confirmed Clara's arrest. They've seen the recordings and the letter. They're charging her with fraud, identity theft, and false reporting. The room was silent for a moment. Then, as if the air had been lifted, I exhaled deeply. It's over, I whispered. Finally. But it wasn't truly over yet. Not in my heart. Because forgiveness isn't something that happens in one moment. It takes time and courage and faith. That night, Daniel stayed with me, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because I asked him to. We talked until the early morning. He told me everything. How Clara had slowly filled his mind with lies, how he thought taking my home was a way to get even with life, how he had believed she loved him for who he was. I listened. Not as a victim, but as a mother. And for the first time in years, I saw the boy I had raised, the one who used to bring me flowers from the garden, who once promised to build me a big house when he grew up. Maybe that promise had finally come true, not through wealth, but through truth. By dawn, I felt lighter than I had in years. The past had finally set me free. The next morning, the sun shone brighter than usual. Birds chirped on the fence, and the wind smelled of rain and roses. I made tea for Daniel and me. For the first time in a long while, he smiled without guilt shadowing his face. Martha came by later with good news. It's official, she said. The charges against you and Daniel have been dropped. Clara confessed during questioning. She said she never meant for it to go this far, but greed took over. I nodded slowly. That's what greed does. It eats you alive and leaves nothing behind. Martha smiled. You know, Helen, not everyone would have survived what you went through. The betrayal, the shelter, the false accusations. But you didn't just survive. You rebuilt yourself. After she left, Daniel followed me to the garden. We stood by the roses, the same ones Henry and I had planted decades ago. Their petals glowed softly in the morning light. I want to make things right, Daniel said quietly. I want to stay close, help people, maybe work with the shelter. I want to be the son you can be proud of again. I placed my hand on his. You already are, Daniel. You just forgot for a while. But life gives us second chances, if we're brave enough to take them. We spent the day cleaning, cooking, and talking. There was laughter again in the house, gentle and real. Later that week, I went back to the shelter. The moment I stepped in, people smiled and clapped. Mrs. Parker, they cheered. You showed them all. I laughed softly. No, my dears. I didn't show anyone anything. I just learned that even when the world throws you away, you can rise again, stronger, wiser, and freer than before. Before I left, Mr. Alvarez handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for teaching us that strength doesn't come from wealth, but from the heart that refuses to give up. Tears welled in my eyes. I looked back at the shelter, the place that had once been my prison but had become my sanctuary. That evening, Daniel and I hosted a small dinner for the shelter volunteers at my mansion. As they walked through the gates, their eyes widened. Some whispered, "It's like a dream." I smiled and said, "This house is not just mine anymore. It belongs to every soul who ever gave me kindness when I had nothing." Laughter filled the rooms. Music played softly in the background. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. As the night ended and everyone left, Daniel hugged me tightly. You know, he said, you really did shock us all. You turned pain into power. I smiled. That's what life is about, Daniel. Turning pain into something beautiful. And never letting the people who hurt you steal your peace. He laughed through his tears. I'll never forget that, Mom. As I watched him walk toward the garden, the moonlight touching his face, I felt Henry's presence near, calm, proud, and peaceful. I whispered into the quiet night. You see, Henry? They dumped me in a shelter with a note that said, you deserve it. But now, I looked around the shining halls of my home, filled with warmth and love. They couldn't even afford to walk through the door. I smiled, lifted my head high, and whispered the final truth of my story. You can lose everything and still win if you never lose your heart. Life has a funny way of turning pain into power. If this story touched your heart, show some love. Hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us, no matter how hard it gets, you can always rise again.